So the third part of terror is called repetition compulsion. Complicating the difficulties of intrusion is something which Freud called the repetition compulsion. This is the often unconscious compulsion for one to relive in present life a traumatic experience that happened in the past. So kind of like a flashback, although it doesn't necessarily have to be a flashback, but it's definitely there. There's different aspects of flashbacks, I would think. I'd have to look that up. But van der Kolk reminds us that unlike ordinary memories that change and become integrated over time, traumatic memories are relived with the intense sensory imagery and emotional intensity that makes a person feel as if the event were taking place in present. So, again, flashback. This is true even when the experience is not consciously remembered. Herman claims that this reliving of the experience is an attempt to integrate the traumatic event and master the overwhelming feelings caused by the original experience. In my correspondence with adoptees, the four most common feelings which they are attempting to master are fear, rage, helplessness, and bottomless sorrow, the abyss or black hole. Unfortunately, these attempts are usually unsuccessful. Instead, the present situation is experienced as if it were the original event. The feelings are again overwhelming, and the beliefs which resulted from the original trauma are reinforced as the adoptee emerges from a failed relationship with an emotionally unavailable partner. They again experience the beliefs, I am unworthy, I don't belong, and I am unloved. So that last part is the inner dialogue that we often have when we experience heartbreak, right? So I don't know about non-adoptees because obviously I'm adopted, but that is definitely something that I experience. And I feel like that little portion is kind of common for the most part if you're not the one breaking up with that person. So if they broke up with you, that's kind of like, the thing. However, there is also a lot of self-sabotage, without understanding that, to no fault, for the most part, to the adoptee, right? It's just kind of things that the adoptee does naturally that non-adoptees don't understand, right? Because non-adopted people generally don't have this trauma since birth. So they don't recognize all this stuff. And like I said, there are adoptees that are in the fog, so they don't even recognize it. So again, they're kind of like flashbacks without a full flashback moment like in TVs and movies. Now, if you're older, so trying to give an example. Okay, how about this? When I was 17, I had a bad car accident. I was diagnosed with PTSD from it, and I did have flashbacks, that moment where that crash happened. However, my flashbacks when it comes to maternal separation are very different than the car crash incident. So, for example, with my maternal separation, also my paternal separation, and I have talked about this before, I think it was when I was reading The Primal Wound, is, for example, I remember, mostly in middle school, I remember it happening, but I'm not going to say it didn't happen in my elementary years. I would go through Central Park to, whether it was eating lunch or we had an afternoon club there, and there were people walking, and my adoptive dad often wore this like tan coat. It was kind of like a detective looking coat, like those old school fancy-ish coats. I don't know if he still has it, but it's been a minute since he's worked. But there were definitely a lot of men that looked, about his height, have the same hair color, the same styling of his hair, wore the coat, and I would see it would just be the back of the person. Now, realistically, I know it's not my dad, right? My dad should be at work. He's over on 45th Street, I think. He worked above Grand Central. So me thinking, oh, that's where he is. Otherwise, he was in court, so downtown. But usually he was above Grand Central where his office was. Now, realistically, I know this probably isn't my dad. But my anxiety, my terror was, oh my God, that's my dad. And there's this fear inside me, and I would start calling out. So we're talking about terror, we're talking about anxiety, we're talking about hypervigilance, right? And we're talking about this repetitive compulsion, right? This is constantly happening. It's not one time, where I would call out, Dad, 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 and they would constantly walk away because they're not really my dad. And it's this fear of being abandoned, of being left there, even though that's not really my dad. And it's one of those things that, this is my personal experience. Maybe you've experienced it yourself as an adoptee, but it brings me back to that. Anyway, I will see you guys next time to talk about disassociation, numbing, or constriction.